so now we're going to move on to the second of our reviews. This is exciting. We're burning up the airwaves tonight. Green Blue is the title, and artist Claire Bryden says, "The view from above has become normalised. Google and Ordnance Survey maps, city centre plans and "You Are Here" stickers on the boards at local nature reserves give the impression of omniscience and omnipotence." God, I had to wrap my face around that one. The very notion of flood risk calls both our knowledge and power into question in the face of uncertainty and the force of nature. What seems to be the most solid and robust is in reality the most fragile and vulnerable. Changing the perspective, looking slant, confers a new understanding and humility. Green Blue is a series of monochrome images of river systems derived from Environment Agency data on land at risk of flooding from rivers and the sea, separating out 21 river catchments. And this is me turning over a page of very nice paper here. And around the south coast, from the Sussex Ouse to the Bristol Avon. Here, in this next package, Claire tells us about her background as an artist and describes the exhibition.
My name is Claire Bryden. I've been an environmental artist for about 3 or 4 years now, and that grew out of my background as a scientist and an environmental activist. It came out of a meeting with Diana Moore, who is an environmental activist and very involved in community building in Exeter. And she's a keen knitter. So when we met for a coffee, she wanted to do something to protest about the Exeter incinerator and make sure it's operated properly because it was already nearing completion. So that sort of sparked it all off for me. We knit chemistry, and that turned into a project, Particulate, the art of knitting chemistry in gentle protest. And I turned to greenhouse gases and had a show in the Glorious Art House, and that turned into a pop-up that appeared in the Green Fair and the Cathedral and in the library. And as part of that, I had some games, Turn Up Trumps, or Top Trumps, my version of Top Trumps, and Fair Weather Friends, my version of Happy Families. I wanted to continue this theme of play, and that led to the little colouring books of climate mindfulness, and then that led to this work. So it's kind of one sort of environment issue based, building on the next. I wanted to look at whether I could create some colour by numbers maps of flood risk in Exeter. So I went to the Environment Agency website and found some data. It didn't work for colour by numbers, but I found that the images were incredibly beautiful. So I made prints initially of 21 different images of river catchment areas around the south coast of England, and they show the Environment Agency data for land at risk of flooding from rivers and seas. So you get these wonderful fractal tree-like images. And so what you can see in this exhibition in the Chapter House is firstly a series of 5 of these images from Devon. So we've got the dart, teen, X, otter and axe. And these are all printed on chiffon fabric hung from steel strips. The idea is that we think we're in control of nature, but actually we are quite vulnerable, especially when we put in lots of engineering works and then build on the floodplains behind them. So what I'm trying to get over is that when we look down, we take this God's eye view, and actually we need to take a little bit of a slant view and recognise our vulnerability and humility and work with nature. Nature repeats its patterns. The second way of presenting the images I looked at is to juxtapose my image created from Environment Agency data with similar images in the rest of nature. So on the other side of the Chapter House you can see a series where I've set, for example, the Stour in Dorset against an image of a lightning flash, or the Tor in North Devon against the image of a hawthorn tree, just picking up the repeating theme and variation in nature.
That was Claire Bryden talking about her exhibition Green Blue at the Chapter House, Exeter Cathedral Chapter House. So, Emma, tell me what your thoughts were about seeing Green Blue.
I was really moved by it, actually. I was able to spend quite a bit of time in the Chapter House with my son, who's 9, and he was sort of drifting in and out of the art and lying on the floor and looking at the ceiling and everything that there is. This is quite an impressive building. So I was almost doing the opposite of being able to go really into real detail, looking into each of these little worlds they seem to be to me. They're really beautiful. Every river has its own sort of personality and character, and that was an education in its own right. And being familiar with some and not familiar with others is, makes me want to get the map out and try and understand them more. But also, at first sight, I actually took them as just literal. This is what the river's patterns are. So the layers of understanding that I've gained as I've sort of learned more about Claire's method of using the data about flood, and then realising actually no, the Exe doesn't look exactly like that. Oh, so that's quite different. The cathedral now is right next to the river, and various sort of things. We realise this. It bears a lot of, exploring, I think, and delving into.
Great. And Emily, what were your thoughts?
Well, I've been reading a book recently called The Power, and the first line of that, really badly paraphrased, is the shape of power is the shape of a tree. And it's to do with this idea that, as Claire says, these sort of repetitions and variations within nature, and thinking about, a tree is the same shape as the nerves in your body, as a river, as lightning. And that struck me before I turned around and looked at the other side of the room, where that's exactly what she'd done. And I went in with my partner and I said, oh, this is just like this. And then was sort of taken by surprise that that's one of the things that she was trying to demonstrate. And that really struck me instantly, because when you do take those images out of context, they do show that up really strongly, that repetition and variation. I thought the prints were beautiful as well. I would happily have one in my home.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, and gorgeous in different ways that she uses the data. So she then uses different techniques. I really loved the dye on the chiffon. I thought they were so delicate and so extraordinary. You could feel yourself getting really close, almost becoming absorbed into them, actually. I thought they were... It's a difficult space to put something that fragile, if you like, as well. I thought they were hung well.
Yeah, it is quite an overwhelming space. Did you think, to start with, that the verses that were above were to do with the exhibition? Because that's me and Ben thought, and they've got these glass things above, and then realised that they weren't. But a lot of them did seem to correlate quite nicely with what she was trying to say, and then one of them really didn't, and we thought, okay, no, that's just the Chapter House.
That's just the Chapter House, yes, indeed. It's quite... Well, I went today, and it was closed to the public, and because there was a meeting going on in there, but I managed to scuttle in with Claire at lunchtime. So there were masses of people in there eating their sandwiches. So I didn't get to see the video. Did you see the videos then? Because I'd really like to hear about what those videos were.
Yeah, the one that wasn't Future Shock, that was called God's Eye View. God's Eye View, that's right, was a series of different sort of maps, but views from above. So and it was sort of... I think each image had the same length of time, so they're given equal weighting. And some of them were literal photographs from the air. There was a photograph of Earthrise from the moon. There was several maps, OS maps, and Google images of Google, like a walking map through Exeter to the Cathedral. And then amongst them all, there was one image of a future Exeter in flood, I think. So that it was, again, got rather an understated kind of message, but you had to sit through and give it a bit of thought. So that, no, these are all, the others are all actual, and this is a prediction, a forecast. Which I kind of, again, enjoyed that it wasn't really telling me, it was showing me that reality, I suppose. Yeah.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Claire, in the interview earlier, was talking about gentle activism, and that's, she is interested in how she can do things that are not, stridently saying this is what you need to do about climate change, but different ways of showing us. What do you think about that? The gentle forms of activism, like knitting.
Yeah. Yes, just like yarn bombing. It didn't strike me personally as a particularly activism driven or inspiring exhibition to me, other than maybe this pointing out of how linked we are to natural patterns and natural occurrences. It did make me, being in a cathedral, I think, is an interesting thing for something like that, because it made me think about notions of design / coincidence, and whether it makes you think, if the same patterns and ideas and vulnerabilities are occurring in several different places that otherwise aren't linked, then is there a design behind it? So I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
What about you, Emma, and the notion of activism? Because obviously she's doing this for a reason. There's a point behind the art that she's making, as well as the producing beautiful images. She's also saying things gently.
I think it's very powerful. For me, I suppose I'm ready for it. If you weren't convinced about climate change, I'm not sure what you'd make of it, except I think what the power is in the care and the love and the pointing out of these really special things, and the information that we then learn that they are changing. I suppose I felt that, citing it in the chapter house at the cathedral, such a place of permanence. The dates of the bishops of Exeter go back to 1050. My son pointed out, because he was interested in that sequence. Go back that far. You can imagine forwards that same amount of time. And does that flood forecast even go that far? How can we possibly imagine that? I think it's very rich and thought provoking. And actually, it was the drop slow tears one with the clear droplets of water with etched river systems inside them. That sort of made me think about that, about each of about the care, the sort of attention and love that you can hold these things within and in yourself as well, as a society, I suppose.
Well, yes, I was taken by the tears too. Those wonderful little engravings. I think there is something about doing something gently and not pushing at it to say, it's all so sad and we should all weep, but actually making these things and calling them tears, but not doing anything more than that. And I thought they were really well executed. And there is something, for me, marvellous about the just the way one could relate the different rivers and how similar and yet different they were, and the different the neurons, and it made me think of blood, it made me think of bodies, it made me think of cabbage leaves, it made me think of all different aspects of nature in a way that I hadn't thought about them before. I'd never thought of a river in relation to a cabbage leaf or a tree in that way. And so I was struck by that too. Great. So is there anything else that you wanted to say about that that struck you?
Yes, I know that Claire's a singer, musician, and the drop slow tears reminded me, well, I suppose it must be taken from a piece of text that's set by a lot of composers, and most famously Orlando Gibbons. So I went afterwards and looked it up, drop slow tears, and it's a really beautiful and very short song. But the third verse is, in your deep floods drown all my faults and fears, nor let his eye see sin but through my tears. I was really grateful to her, really, for sort of pointing me back towards that through her title, which I don't know if it has resonance other than through that text or not, musical setting, other than our own tears.
Yeah. Yes, I was taken by something that she said that I just read out, which was about looking slant at something, which is taken from Emily Dickinson, about writing slant, so that you don't write straight at something, but you write slant, which is taking another view, taking a slightly different view on it. And that's an interesting way to think about activism too, I think. So thank you, Claire Brighton, for all that. And Green Blue can be seen at Exeter Cathedral's Chapter House until Sunday the 4th of June. That's this Sunday. And for more information about when it's open, etc., because that's another thing, was that, I mean, it had its moments being in the Chapter House. I think for me today it was really quite difficult, and accessing it sometimes can be quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't signed. No. The door was locked. I was expecting to be able to get through, and the people at the front of the cathedral I had to go around to, I would think I was lucky to find someone who did know what I was talking about. So more signage and an open door would be really wonderful if we want people to
find somebody who knew what we were talking about. So that would be useful.
Yeah, that's a shame. Okay, but we managed to see it, and if you are pushy enough, you can get in there too. So you can find more information at exeter-cathedral.org.uk and get along and see that if you can.